For 100 years now, the name of Senghenydd has resonated in the memory of Wales. One word, one unforgettable story. At 8:10 on a Tuesday morning, the 14th of October 1913, an explosion ripped through the workings of the Universal Colliery 2,000 feet below this spot. It killed 439 men and boys, the worst mining disaster in British history. The terrible rumble called the people from their homes. They gathered in fearful congregation. Collieries of South Wales were the most dangerous in Britain, many of them gassy and dusty. Senghenydd was known as a fiery pit.
The horror must have been brought home to them when the trains came up from Cardiff, absolutely loaded with coffins.
The traffic of coffins, seemingly endless, drove out hope and spread the suffering through every street. More than 200 women were widowed, and in one street alone, 45 men died.
The young children haven't even seen a coal fire today, but they have to know that the price of coal was really too much.
A skilled photographer was working nearby. He hurried to Senghenydd and took pictures of remarkable clarity and drama. And the years have not softened their impact. They remain a timeless and moving record of grief and loss. Senghenydd's story is typical valleys, a place where hill farmers scraped a living for centuries. And then a town mushroomed after the Universal Colliery opened in 1896. Hundreds of men, most of them from Senghenydd and neighbouring Abertrydur, came to work in the pit. In 1901, a huge explosion at the colliery killed 81 miners, all of the night shift except one. Only William Harris got out alive. In those years, Welsh collieries accounted for 1/3 of Britain's mining fatalities, a steady tick-tock of death and injury. Jill Jones is researching the two disasters and their effect on the women of the valley. She was born in Senghenydd and married a miner, and she's part of the Aber Valley Heritage Group.
Can you imagine that on that morning, a shudder and wonder what it is? Apparently there were plates fell off a dresser and a clock fell off a wall, and all of a sudden they heard the hooter go. Not the long hooter for the start and the end of the shift, the short, sharp hooter continuing, and then they realised that there was an explosion. Almost 1,000 men underground. I mean, there must have been pandemonium. The wives and mothers must have run to the pit, because how else would they get any news or any information? Who's going to come and tell them what's happening? They had to find out for themselves. And it was several hours before the east side were brought up safe, just over 400 men, and there must have been relief with all the women thinking the others would follow. But they never did. Apart from a small group of men that were found early on the Wednesday morning, 18, and after that no more came up. Coffin after coffin was brought from the railway side and to the pit head. What belongings were on the men, the first lot of men, were put on the coffins, and the wives had to walk along and see if they could recognise something. Okay with a tobacco box, okay perhaps with a watch. What clothes were left were put on there, and women recognised a patch that they thought they'd sewn on, and that's how they identified the men.
Mair Lewis was born and brought up in Abertrydur. In 1913, her father, Thomas Davis, was 14 years old, a schoolboy with a part-time job feeding the colliery canaries. Mair's grandfather, Benjamin Davis was working underground and was one of the fortunate 18 miners pulled out alive.
When they found him, which was after quite a while really, they brought him up and he had gas coming out of his fingers. I can't imagine really what with gas coming out of fingers.
What does that mean? Was it coming out of cuts?
No, just coming out from out through the skin. I mean, it seemed. I couldn't comprehend that at all. So they decided to take him up to London too, and they took him up immediately, more or less within days, to see the doctors up in London.
But there was no long-lasting effect?
Oh, no, no, there wasn't, no.
Growing up, Meyer heard countless stories of the disaster.
It must have been a terrible shock for people. I mean, they were saying that the mountain around, you can see the mountains around when you go up there. They said they were covered with people, black. They were all people that had walked over from other valleys to see it when they'd heard about it. There was a noise all night of walking down the street there, carrying coffins, men in coffins, and that went on for hours and hours and hours. I remember being told about that. Yes, about the coffins coming down the main road there.
This is my great-grandfather, Evan Hopkins James, who sadly lost his life in the disaster, and he was just 42 years of age, and that's his wife there, Margaret James, and between them they had 11 children, but one of them died in infancy. I will recall my grandfather telling me of the day of the explosion when they came to the house to tell them the sad news. They had to go and collect his body from the colliery, and he carried the body home with his mother in the family tin bath. I mean, picture this, a 13-year-old boy carrying his dead father home in the family tin bath. It doesn't bear thinking about today, and my great-grandmother had to lay him out on the kitchen table and clean his body ready for the burial. So quite a tragic story, like so many other families in this valley.
Above Senghenydd, the church of St Ilan. 60 miners were buried here, and 40 of the graves have no headstone. The families could not afford them. The Reverend Sue Rees, the parish priest, shows me how the church register tells the story. It was a busy time for clergy.
It would have been tremendously busy, because obviously there would be the assistance to the families who've been bereaved, there's the funerals to be taken, and there's the aftercare that you give as well. Clergy take funerals, it's part of their vocation, but it does still take an emotional toll. You look through this burial register and you see the vicar's name, service after service. It must have taken a terrific toll. And there's a family here where the father was killed aged 20 in the disaster, and 2 entries below, a burial on the same day, is a 10-month-old child. Whether it be his child, whether it be a younger brother, you know, devastating for that family. You know, you have others in here as well who are brothers. You've got another one further down here, over the next page, where you have this gentleman, John Richard Kirkham, who was killed in the disaster, aged 19, of 67 High Street. And if you turn over the page, buried on the same day, is another gentleman with the surname of Kirkham from the same address, aged 62.
Father, perhaps.
Father, perhaps, but not killed in the disaster. Did he die as a result of, you know, the shock?
And it seems that people simply absorbed the horror of it all. What else to do?
What else do you do? You know, when you've got one death in your family, it's traumatic enough. When it's not just your family, and there perhaps are more than one member of your family, but this is true for everyone around, how can you live with the horror of that? Perhaps the only way you can do it is to almost block out the emotion of it. You know, it's a whole community in grief.
In the wake of the disaster, there were 205 widows and 542 children, fatherless and bewildered. Join us after the break. Welcome back. In one small colliery village, more than 400 funerals and hundreds of grieving families with precious little to live on.
One of the women who had to struggle with the shock and crisis was Lindsay Whittle's great-grandmother, Margaret James.
And she was one among, well, more than 200 widows, and she must have had a hard time of it after 10 children.
Yes, I wonder how they managed. I'm told that they actually took in lodgers. I mean, to have 10 children and lodgers, what a struggle, you know, what a remarkable woman she must have been, like all of the other women of the valley. They were the backbone of these communities.
To help their mother, her sons, including Lindsay's grandfather, went back to work in the pits.
I don't think she ever got over losing her husband. She didn't remarry at all, but so many women must have struggled to earn a living because they were so used to the man coming home with the wages.
A fund was set up to support the devastated community and the hundreds of bereaved women and children. It took weeks to retrieve the bodies, and some of the victims were never found.
And there's this among your souvenirs.
Yes, I seem to have acquired a serviette, which I understand came from the Lord Mayor of Cardiff's dinner that he held to raise money for the disaster fund.
A payout from the fund was the only financial help widows could expect.
It wasn't much money, but it was half the man's wage. And if there were no children or a wife, the dependents had a one-off sum of £300. The trustees, there are about 40 trustees, starting off with Lord Merthyr, Lord this, Sir that, all the way down to a few commoners from Senghenydd, like the vicar.
Any
and
women?
The doctor. No women at all on the trustees. The rules were laid down, how it should be issued out, providing, and this is the worst part, the women remain chaste. And if they didn't remain chaste, then their benefits would be taken away from them. How dare they?
How dare they, yes.
How dare they?
But different days.
Different days, oh yes.
Still
days.
makes you angry, I think.
Yeah, oh yes, furious actually.
The financial hardship was just one part of the very lonely struggle so many women endured.
Families didn't actually come into this valley until about 1896. And they came in as single families. They didn't have the benefit of a wider support. So when the first accident happened, I mean, that must have been absolutely tremendous for them because they had nobody to turn to. It wasn't that much better at the second disaster in 1913. They were the immediate families, perhaps a parent and son working, but they weren't many grandparents, so they didn't have that support. And we can read from records, you know, I mean, there were many suicides, many people moved away, and many people just got on with it.
Did they talk to each other about it? Is that how they did it, or did they simply blot it out?
I think it must have been blotted out. I could never have survived what they've gone through. I don't think any of us here could have, so they were a different type of women, weren't they?
6 months after the disaster, the mine owners faced charges here at the court in Caerphilly. No one knows exactly what caused the explosion. It seems that somehow gas came into contact with a naked flame in a lamp locker. In July 1914, the Caerphilly magistrates gave their judgment. Yes, the mine owners had breached regulations. The fines amounted to £24. There was outrage.
Quite a derisory sum, really, for so many young men and boys' lives. I believe it worked out at 1 shilling and a penny farthing per life. Well, what price of life? Well, I tell you what, it's certainly not 1 shilling and a penny farthing. And I think if that was to happen today, there would actually be blood in the gutters, I think.
By 1916, the pit was in full wartime production, and local men were fighting and dying on the front line, adding to the toll of death in one small place. The colliery finally closed in 1928.
When you were growing up, when you were a small girl, you were aware there had been something big and awful.
Yes, oh, absolutely. There were people around that were telling you about it, and oh gosh, yes. We used to talk about it in school. My grandfather was in 2 more disasters. One was in Mardy.
He sounds indestructible.
Well, he was a very, very strong man, very strong. I used to hear lots of stories from my grandfather.
I played in the Senghenydd colliery area where the ruins still were. I mean, it's only recently the colliery has been cleared now, and I used to play in the washeries and get black and have a row off my mother at the time, but yeah, it was part of growing up here. My own great-grandfather was a member of the committee that helped to raise the funds following the 1901 explosion, and in fact the committee still meets, and I'm a member of that committee some 112 years on, and I'm quite proud to follow his tradition. We actually raise funds to give money to help young students who are struggling financially at university, so there's something positive come out of it, I think.
It has its roots right in that disaster.
Firmly embedded in the disaster without a shadow of a doubt.
The pit head buildings were demolished in 1963. Nothing, of course, could erase the pain. In place of the colliery buildings, a school was built, and Senghenydd was looking to the future. A memorial is dedicated to the 520 men killed in the 2 disasters here.
Senghenydd itself endures, a community of people with a story they want to tell. And people come from all over the world to hear it at the little museum.
Yes, indeed. So come on in and I'll show you all what we got here.
Pipes?
Yeah. They used
Lamps?
to smoke those years ago.
Yeah.
Walls. Aye, and lamps, helmets.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And this is a book of remembrance, all the names of the men, that boys who were killed. A father and 3 sons in this book. 18, 16 and 14, whatever, and the husband, all dead.
And a piece of the coal that was at the heart of everything.
That's it, coal from Senghenydd pit.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is the hooter that every colliery had, was blown at 6 o'clock, up at 6 in the morning, and 7 o'clock, just to tell the people that they were going down the pit and the time. But on October the 14th of this year, now 2013, they're going to blow that at 8:10 in the morning. That's the time that the explosion happened.
That'll be amazing.
And it's going to be very emotional.
Yes.
Penry Evans is 92, an ex-colliery worker. He grew up in Senghenydd among people whose memories of the disaster were still strong.
People never spoke about it, really, you know. I think they wanted to forget all about the explosion, because they had enough to do to live without worrying about what happened in the explosion.
You yourself worked in the pits.
I worked there, yes, for 30-odd years in the Windsor Colliery, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Did you have any concern about going into the pit because of what had happened? In
Nothing at all. No. I worked on top, but the men went down, they never thought anything of it at all. They just went down and done their job, 8 hours or 7.5, whatever, down the pit. It was their job, their work.
During the coal era in Wales, 6,000 miners were killed in disasters. In October, the Abervalley Heritage Group will open the Welsh National Mining Memorial on the place of the Senghenydd disasters. Every Senghenydd victim will be remembered, as will every disaster.
I said when I was 70 or 80, if I can live to 2013, I'll be quite happy, and I have. I'm hoping I can be here now in October, when it's going to be a wonderful day, that day, and our memorial garden will be out of this world.
They will never, ever be forgotten. And that's what it's all about. We must never forget. You know, coal and its economy is gone from us, but we mustn't forget all the sacrifices that they made.
These are not forgotten graves. They're part of the story Senghenydd wants to tell. The story it will commemorate 100 years on the 14th of October.
Next time, a light in the darkness.